Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. Coming up on this edition, we're going to be talking about the Saints Week 2 matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers. And also, we're going to be talking about Chris Olave and some of the comments that he made at his last press conference with the media. Keep it locked right here. The State of the Saints podcast starts right now.
Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast. Please subscribe to our channel.
All I gotta say is, who dat?
What's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones. And yes, I am the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And thank you so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. Really do appreciate your time. And before I get started, I would be remiss if I didn't mention what happened on this day somewhat 24 years ago. Of course, we know it's September 11th. On September 11, 2001, the tragic event that took place in New York City when two planes hit the World Trade Center. 24 years later, you still have families that are still trying to pick up the pieces and trying to make sense of that tragic event. So my thoughts and prayers go out to the family members of the individuals that were victims on that day. And also to those that are still healing during that time. That was a tough time. I can remember being a sophomore at Frederick Douglass High School at the time, and dealing with that situation, man. And everybody was scared, didn't know exactly what was going on. So once again, my thoughts and prayers go out to those individuals, and just prayers for the world, man. It's a pretty weird world that we're living in right now, but regardless, man, we want to send thoughts and prayers to those that are affected by some of the things that have been taking place with 9/11 and also just around the world, man. Insane. But let's go ahead and try to make sense out of the Saints Week 2 matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers. The Saints have a huge matchup, and, you're looking at the 49ers right now. They're going through it, dealing with a lot of injuries to key players. Of course, they put tight end George Kittle on IR, and now we are hearing reports about quarterback Brock Purdy being out 2 to 5 weeks dealing with turf toe. So it is a thing as catching a team at the right time, and this could be one of those situations where the Saints are catching the 49ers in a vulnerable state. I mentioned that this morning on my Saints short. Just focusing on the team, which I'll put out a little bit later for you all to check out. But the New Orleans Saints have everything in front of them. And there are a few things that I am going to be looking for in week number 2. And feel free to put your comments in the chat, what you're looking for in week number 2 versus the 49ers. But one thing I'm looking for is from Spencer Rattler. I think that this will be very telling about the starting quarterback experience of Spencer Rattler going up against the 49ers and Robert Saleh being the defensive coordinator. Robert Saleh is back with the 49ers, and we know that he had the 49ers as one of the best defenses in football, and I don't see that changing. So I feel if Spencer Rattler goes out versus the 49ers and we see a really good performance by him, I think that even the biggest skeptic would have to start believing that Spencer Rattler is trending in the right direction. I'm also looking for the penalties to be a little bit on a downtick. Now, I understand, like, when you're playing tempo and you're trying to speed up the offensive process, sometimes you're not set. Sometimes those pre-snap penalties are going to happen. But the New Orleans Saints are going to have to find a way to minimize the penalties. I heard that they had officials at practice throughout the week, so that is a plus. Credit to Kellen Moore and his staff trying to make the necessary corrections to make sure that the Saints don't beat themselves this week in the form of having too many penalties. 13 penalties for 89 yards. I mean, that'll get you beat every single time. And I don't care what the 49ers are lacking offensive-wise. If you give them opportunities to stay on the field, even the most mediocre quarterback can be able to get the ball into the end zone. The New Orleans Saints don't have room for error. The Saints are going to have to rely on one another to get this win. I expect for Robert Saleh to do some things to Spencer Rattler that he may not be ready for. And also, you're going to have to look at the defense, possibly generate some turnovers for the New Orleans Saints, maybe give short fields to the offense and allow them to be able to generate points. Also, the red zone. The Saints were 1 of 4 in the red zone against the Arizona Cardinals. That is unacceptable. Getting down to the red zone and cashing in with touchdowns instead of field goals are key. And also Blake Grupe. You can't afford for him to be going through the yips and missing short field goals that can keep the Saints in games. It's going to be a Herculean effort for the New Orleans Saints, in my opinion, to knock off the 49ers, even though they're shorthanded. They still have Christian McCaffrey, who had over 140 all-purpose yards last week versus the Seattle Seahawks. And also Ricky Pearsall had 108 yards receiving. So even though they don't have Brandon Ayuk, they don't have George Kittle, they have some young, capable wide receivers out there and also playmakers like Christian McCaffrey that can hurt the New Orleans Saints. They got to be able to stop the run and neutralize Christian McCaffrey the best way that they can. I don't expect for the New Orleans Saints to completely shut down Christian McCaffrey. Guy is one of the best running backs in football, but they have to be able to keep him under control. They got to be able to make sure that he doesn't run amok on his defense. So the defense also has to make sure that they're wrapping up and tackling. Too many opportunities to get tackles, to make sure that they get off the field on third down and make sure that big plays don't just become even bigger. So they have to work on the tackling. They have to work on their communication, and they definitely got to keep Christian McCaffrey in check. Defensively, you got to get pressure on Mac Jones. I know some people, when they hear that the Saints are playing against Mac Jones, they're like, oh, man, this should be an easy out. But Mac Jones has started in the league. He's had 49 starts with the teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, of course, he was drafted by the New England Patriots. So he's been a starter in the league. He's won some football games. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Mac Jones can do enough in order for the 49ers to win. So you can't take this game lightly. And honestly, if the Saints can pull off this victory, I think that it can be a step in the right direction, because if you look around, the teams that we thought they had no chance and of beating, it seems like they really have a chance. Seattle, who they play in week 3, they are very vulnerable. They made quite a few mistakes. They were leading a game versus the 49ers in week 1 and still end up losing. So the Saints have a chance of winning some of these football games if they can just play ahead of the chains, minimize the mistakes, and make sure that they don't have just a boatload of penalties like they did in week 1. But let me go ahead and read some of your comments. But those are my keys to victory for the New Orleans Saints so far. In a few minutes, we're going to get into a press conference that the media had with Chris Olave. And I just thought that there were a few things that kind of stood out. And it could kind of slide through the cracks if you didn't pay that much attention to it. Or maybe I was just putting too much emphasis into what he was actually saying. Maybe it was a bunch of nothing. I'll let you be the judge of that. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. But I do want to acknowledge the donations here. We got Michael. Thank you very much for the $1.99. He says, game not going to be as easy as fans believe. Yeah, I don't believe that at all. I have a lot of respect for Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. And we know that they're a really good football team. And sometimes when you have a really good coach, sometimes you can go into a game kind of short-handed and still come away with a victory. That's what separate the good coaches from the great ones. And also, Mike, once again, thank you very much for the $1.99. Says, was speaking in general as well, TJ. But thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Sucks to hear Brock Purdy out 2 to 5 weeks. Yeah, man, you don't never want to see guys get hurt. But, sometimes, you catch a team, when they're dealing with injuries, when they're going through things. And sometimes, you got to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. So we've seen a couple of years ago where the New Orleans Saints had a little bit of, I don't want to call it luck, but some unfortunate circumstances for other teams, fortunate for the New Orleans Saints, that they were going up against like backup quarterbacks, like Tyson Bagent and going up against Gardner Minshew and guys like that. So, it wasn't them going up against a lot of teams starting quarterbacks, but in some of those games, they weren't able to get it done. Hopefully the New Orleans Saints can be able to capitalize on this because, I just think that the Saints, they just need a win. I think that Saints fans just want to see this team go out there and get a victory. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It can be a game-winning field goal. It can be the Saints getting an interception, a pick six. But they got to find a way to win a football game because I just think that winning cures all. And if the New Orleans Saints can actually Saints fans can actually see the Saints win a football game with Spencer Rattler, I think it can kind of put their mind at ease just a tad bit that they can possibly win. But right now, you have Spencer Rattler, who has never won an NFL game as a starter, and people are going to start wondering, can he win a football game, or can the New Orleans Saints win with him as the starting quarterback? Fair or unfair, that's just the reality of it. Let's see. I'm looking for from a win, lead by Spence. In the words of AD, we got to clean up these penalties. Yeah, man, you gotta clean up the penalties. You definitely do. Like those penalties are key. Key drive killers. They just kill the momentum. The Saints have got to find a way to cut down on these penalties, man. I mean, this has been something that has been plaguing this team since last season. So you got to play some disciplined football. But I like what the coaching staff did, bringing in officials to kind of police some things and make sure that the Saints players understand what they need to do versus the 49ers to make sure that they cut down on the penalties. But this could be the weekend the Saints win their first game of the season. Yeah, I mean, it can, and honestly, the way that they played last week, they had a chance in the end. If the New Orleans Saints can cut down on the penalties and maybe put a little bit more emphasis on a balanced attack, they can beat the 49ers. And you better catch them right now because the 49ers, they're a good football team. So you can't be playing around with them. You got to come up with the best game plan possible in order for, you to win this football game. But let's go ahead and we'll stop right there for a second. I want to go ahead and play a few clips here. This is from a press conference that took place on Wednesday after practice. The media spoke with wide receiver Chris Olave. And, of course, Chris Olave has had some issues and a history with concussions. And he took a big hit by rookie Will Johnson, in a game on a wide receiver screen. Of course, he was taken to the blue tent. The Saints Saints medical staff were erring on the side of caution when it comes to Chris Olave, and understandably so with his history. But Chris Olave, isn't that concerned, and he does understand that the team is just looking out for him due to his injury history.
No, I'm good, man. It's just tough, with my history. I feel like I've taken a lot of hits here, but it is what it is. I feel like it was the right read with the nickel blitz, but I thought I was going to get the ball and have a lot of space, but I ain't see dude coming. He just knocked my wind out, so I'm glad he didn't hit me in my head. But
so I'm not, I'm pretty sure everybody heard that, but I don't know if you noticed, but I just need you to pay attention to the first few statements that he made, all right, before he went into the story about him being taken to the medical tent. Maybe I'm tripping, but check it out.
No, I'm good, man. It's just tough, with my history. I feel like I've taken a lot of hits here, but it is what it is. I feel like.
So did y'all notice what he said, though? He said, I've been taking a lot of hits here. So I just thought that was alarming. Now, I'm like I said, I might be putting way too much into this, but this is a guy who understands and maybe is a little bit frustrated at, catching some of these passes that's getting them knocked on is you know what. And I just found that very, very weird, that he would say that. But it sounds like someone that is very frustrated at, being put in harm's way. And, as a quarterback, you want to get the ball into the hands of the playmakers, but you also want to make sure that you're protecting your wide receivers. You want to throw it in a place where they can actually get down, or if you feel like there's a possibility of them taking a huge hit, you might want to just throw the ball at their feet. But, it seems like he is a tad bit frustrated. And this was the first statement. And I was like, maybe it wasn't nothing. But when I heard him say this, kind of alluding to it again, it just made me feel like, is Chris Olave a little bit frustrated with some of these hits? Check it out.
Yeah, every time they see me take a big hit or like something like that, I feel like they take me to the tent automatically. I feel like it's gonna be a lot or more than usual this year, but yeah, I try to tell them I'm good. But
so he said, I feel like it's going to happen this season probably more than usual. So I don't know, man. It just seemed like to me this guy's a little bit frustrated at getting the ball and don't know if I'm just gonna catch the ball and my light's gonna get knocked out or what. But I just noticed like those two clips, it just seemed like if you didn't pay attention to what he said, it probably would just slide past you. But the fact that he was like, man, I just feel like, man, I'm always taking hits here. And he also said something like, well, it just seemed like this is going to be a reoccurring thing, me taking these big time hits. So I don't know. Like they're going to have to figure this thing out. I understand that football is a very physical sport. It's a sport where it isn't ballet. But at the end of the day, no wide receiver wants to get his head knocked off. And, I know some people are talking about that was the right read. But I just think that sometimes the quarterbacks have to sense that if they feel like it's one of those situations where a wide receiver can possibly get his head knocked off, might want to just throw the ball at the ground to try to protect your wide receiver, and live to fight another day. But what do y'all think about that? Maybe I'm overreacting here, but I just feel like he seemed like he's a little bit frustrated when it comes to that, which I understand. Like nobody wants to, put their body in harm's way like that. You want your quarterback to be able to protect you, even if you can't see it yourself. Trizzy, thank you very much for the $4.99. Says, remember we did play Mac Jones 2 years ago with a similar defense, but him and Shanahan can make a difference. Love the show, TJ. Yeah, I remember that. The Saints did play Mac Jones. They end up beating him. I believe Tyrann Mathieu had a pick 6 in the game. But, this is a completely different defense. This is a completely different coordinator, and a person that's calling plays. So we know that Kyle Shanahan can indeed get the best out of the quarterbacks that play for him. So Mac Jones can win football games. I don't want anybody to just think, oh, man, they playing Mac Jones. Like, just because a guy's a backup or he flaked out in a certain place. We know that sometimes organizations fail quarterbacks, fail players in general. And when they go to a different team, you might see more production out of them or a better version of that player. So just because you see Mac Jones and you're like, oh, man, you ain't got Brock Purdy, doesn't mean that man isn't capable of winning a football game for the 49ers. Mac Jones going to look like the second coming of Joe Montana. Watch. Well, if he looks like that, then he probably going to set himself up for a bigger payday next year. I think that it's a matter of who you go to and what type of coaching alignment that you have. Like, where do you line up when it comes to, the coordinator, the defensive coordinator, the position coach. Like sometimes, like if you go to the right team, I mean, it could be a really good fit and people will see a better version of you. And maybe that's the case with Mac Jones. At the end of the day, all receivers take big hits. That's a rookie cornerback hit you, bro. It don't matter, man. I mean, look, rookie, 6-year vet, but all these guys are trained to be the best they can possibly be. And Will Johnson is, it looks like he's going to be the real deal. So, I mean, nobody wants to get hit at the end of the day. But, when you look at Olave, he has absorbed a lot of punishment and, and also, that's frustrating, man, when you want to play and, you're taking these big hits and it's causing you not to be able to do so. So he just wants to be in the lineup, man. I mean, this is a big year for Chris Olave. He's looking for a new contract. You got to put your best foot forward. You got to put your best production out there so you can maximize your portfolio here. So he wants to be out there on the field. He wants to show his toughness, his mental toughness as well as his physical toughness. So you got to keep this guy upright. I already read that. Says this is why we need to get a future QB. Look, I just think that the New Orleans Saints need to figure out what they have in these quarterbacks. Like, I don't know what these guys are. I don't know if they're the future of this franchise. They just need to some fine tuning, a couple games under their belt. I don't know exactly what they need, but I do know this. The Saints need to get better on the offensive side of the football. They need guys that's going to be able to make plays. I'm extremely concerned at the New Orleans Saints not being able to have that possession guy, the 50-50 ball guy. And I just think that is going to hurt them throughout the entire season. I don't think that the New Orleans Saints are going to be able to find and generate success if they don't have that big body guy that can be able to move the chains. So maybe Devon Vele could be that guy. I know that he wasn't utilized last week that much. He was only out there for a couple of plays, but I think that had a lot to do with the fact that he just got with the team a few weeks ago. And, he hasn't been acclimated to the playbook. So he was only able to be in there in certain packages. I think as the weeks go by, maybe he can emerge as that big target. But right now, the New Orleans Saints don't have it. And you're throwing 50-50 balls up to Rashid Shaheed, which, that's not his wheelhouse. To me, Brandon Cooks catching 50-50 balls, not his wheelhouse. Chris Olave, he can give you a circus catch, but in most cases, the 50-50 ball is not his wheelhouse. That's the reason why you're seeing Juwan Johnson getting the majority of the targets, because he's that big target in the middle of the field. But I feel like his play is way too inconsistent for them to just utilize him alone. Now, he had a solid game last week versus the Cardinals, but I'm just wondering, he's not going to be that guy, in my opinion, based on what I've seen over the last couple of years, that's going to just be that 1,000-yard big target for you. He probably will be able to give you a big catch every now and then. But, I just feel like his play is a little bit too up and down. The New Orleans Saints need that desperately, and they don't have that. So didn't agree with that a year ago, but just from his health history and sense of frustration, I would trade him. Look, I said this, and I was thinking about this. I was going to wait, but I feel this way. If the New Orleans Saints aren't finding success after 6 or 7 weeks, I think that's something that they may need to consider. If you are the New Orleans Saints and you have a large enough sample size of, what Chris Olave is for your team, at least, I think that that's something that they might need to explore down the line, because, man, I want to see this guy thrive. And I think that right now the Saints trying to figure themselves out is kind of hurting his stock. So I think that's something that they may need to consider, because this is, to me, one of those Brandon Cooks situations, ironically. How Brandon Cooks was like the Saints' number one guy, but then all of a sudden they got Michael Thomas, and all of a sudden, Brandon Cooks became expendable, and they end up trading him to the Patriots. I think the New Orleans Saints may need to consider that if they aren't finding success, because are you going to pay Chris Olave long term like a number one guy when he hasn't he's been number one on the depth chart, but he hasn't been that wide receiver that takes over games. Where's that? I said this before. Where's that Chris Olave game where you're like, man, Chris Olave took over the game. Man, they couldn't stop him that day. It's never been one of those games. I want to say maybe it was one game, and that was his rookie year, and they played against the Carolina Panthers, and he had nearly 200 yards receiving. And that's when Jameis Winston was just forcing him the football. And even in those cases, if you go back and watch that game, he probably should have had about 230, 240 yards receiving. There was a lot of drop passes. There was a lot of contested catches that he couldn't come down with. So to me, I think the Saints have a very huge decision to make is if they want to pay Chris Olave long term, or they want to consider maybe trading him, or even like letting him walk. Because I think he's good, but I don't think he's the receiver that the New Orleans Saints need right now. Like, and if he is, like, he's probably that complimentary receiver, like a number two. Like if your number one receiver goes down, he can pick up the slack. But counting on him week in, week out like that, I don't think that's who he is. TJ, would you consider bringing in Von Bell and Marcus Williams for a reunion? We need depth at that position. Yeah, Scarecrow, I mentioned that. I mentioned the Saints should maybe bring in Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams is, still a talented safety. He's a guy that's rangy. And also he can get his hands on the football. Like, we know that he can intercept the football. And, you got some Saints fans that's still bitter about, the Minneapolis Miracle. I mean, that man had made so many plays since then. And then people would like to talk about that Minneapolis Miracle, but they don't even want to talk about the fact that the Saints wouldn't even been in that position they were in if that guy didn't have an interception in the game in the third quarter. So I don't know, man. I like Marcus Williams. I think that, his skill set could benefit the New Orleans Saints. I'm also looking at John Johnson, who's still out there. He's familiar with Brandon Staley's defense. He's played in it when he was with the Rams. And, he has been a leader on the defensive side of the football. So I think he'll bring some production to you. But it seems like the New Orleans Saints are probably going to stick with the young group, Jordan Howden and Sanker, trying to get those guys some reps and get them experience. But I just hope that if it doesn't pan out the way that some Saints fans want, I just hope that they just have the patience to allow this guy to go through the motions. Like, man, what bothers me about some of these Saints fans out here is they want to see these guys. Oh, man, I want to see what such and such can do. Oh, and then all of a sudden he goes out there and he looks like inexperienced and young. And then all of a sudden, like, they want to just write the guy off after 1 or 2 games. Like, I just think that, they have a lot of impatient fans out here. And, if the guy doesn't give you everything that you're looking for right away, I don't think it's an indicator of what he can be. You got to allow these guys to go through the motions and be able to learn how to become pros. So everybody likes the shiny new toy, until you press all the bells and whistles. And then all of a sudden, like, I know what it's going to do. And, but you ain't even reading the instructions about what the full capabilities of that may be. So I just hope that people will have the patience if this guy, just looks like a rookie. But everybody wants to see the new thing. Everybody wants to see what this other guy have. And, you also have people talking about Tyler Shuck after Spencer Rattler's performance, which the general consensus was Spencer Rattler played pretty doggone decent. If you look around the NFL, I mean, not too many quarterbacks knock your socks off. Yeah, the elite ones did, the ones that are in the upper echelon. But if you look around the NFL, even like some of the top quarterbacks in the league kind of struggle statistically. And when you look at Rattler's numbers, I mean, he's middle of the pack, which people understand. He's a middle of the pack quarterback. So I don't know what people are expecting. I don't know what they always looking and thinking that, oh man, like, this guy isn't good enough. Let's put the other guy in. Like, it's almost like how you see in a movie. Like, you see this, you see the henchman or whatever. Like, the henchman just standing in the shadows, and he just got his arm folded and stuff, and ain't really selling anything, just looking straight ahead. And towards the end of the movie, you like, man, I know this dude about to wreck shop. Like, when they get him to fight, oh man, he gonna wreck shop. And it's like, most of the time it's like the hero probably beat him with 2 minutes. Like, I don't. But what my point when I'm making is, a lot of people just feel like, oh man, this guy's sitting on the bench, we don't know what he can do, so put him in. And because we don't know what he can do, like, he's the best choice. But when it comes to the quarterback position, the Saints drafted, this coaching staff drafted Tyler Shuck. So, if people are looking for Tyler Shuck to play better than Spencer Rattler, I mean, I just don't think that that's ideal, because if he could play better than him at this point, then he would be in the lineup, especially since this coaching staff drafted this guy pretty early. So, they want this thing to work out with Spencer Rattler. And like I said, I think he had a solid performance. If Olave sustain another concussion and don't hit those elite numbers, the Saints might indeed trade him. Yeah, I think that you have to consider that, especially if the season going sideways. I believe Rattler played well enough to where we shouldn't be considering Tyler just yet. Yeah, I don't think that Saints fans need to be considering it either. I just think that Saints fans just want to see top-notch quarterback play, and I just don't feel like you're gonna get that from any of these quarterbacks, at least not this season. So I get it, man. You want your team to look like something. You want your team to win football games. You want your team to be a better version of themselves. I get all that, but at the end of the day, these are young, inexperienced quarterbacks, and they're going to have to find their way and figure it out. And in some cases, this is uncharted territory to a lot of Saints fans. And when you have had years of prosperity from the quarterback position, you don't want to go back to the way it was before you actually had that production. So, everybody's looking for the next Drew Brees, but I don't think he's in a building. They're looking for Rattler to be Mahomes, TJ. They want him to be Jaden Daniels. Look at Jaden Daniels when he first came in the NFC Championship. People don't want to wait no more. Yeah, because we look at what these other teams have at the quarterback position. And we end up living in this echo chamber where, the thing that we're looking at right now is the biggest thing. And, that's what the standard is. But we don't understand that we're looking at exceptions to the rule. Like, I don't expect for a young, inexperienced quarterback to come in and just find a lot of success. That's the reason why a lot of them get praised when they do, because it's such an outlier and it's few and far in between that you have rookie quarterbacks that are playing on the level of some of the NFL's elite. So when they do play that way, everybody's paying attention to it and they're putting a microscope on that player. But it doesn't happen like that all the time. For every one player that you see like Jaden Daniels, you have Drake May, who is sitting on the bench and letting Jacoby Brissett be the starter. Or, you see like some of these other quarterbacks like Jordan Love, who had to wait his turn with Aaron Rodgers. These guys find success later on, as they develop, but it wasn't there right away. So I just think that because you see a lot of quarterbacks with success, well, not many, but they get they get hyped up when they do have instant success. Everybody feels like that's what the new wave of quarterback is, but that's just not the case. You're going to have more so than not situations like Spencer Rattler where you're going to have to rely on a supporting cast around you in order for you to have success. Right? It's not going to be, I just put the whole team on my back for a lot of rookies. Some guys that happens to, like Ben Roethlisberger. I believe the Steelers went 15-1 in his rookie year. You look at Cam Newton. He started off his career with 2 back-to-back 400-yard passing games. RG3 had a really good stellar rookie campaign, right? CJ Stroud. And you start looking at some of these players and they say, oh, man, we're seeing the next big thing. And then all of a sudden, that's how we evaluate quarterbacks when they're young. And that's not fair. So I just think that Saints fans need to have a wait and see approach when it comes to this situation. I think that, you should walk into every Saints game this season with minimal expectations and look for the good. And I just think that, you'll probably have a better viewing experience. But looking at this team like they're a Super Bowl contender and getting mad because you're seeing mistakes by inexperienced individuals, which you're going to see. I just think that is frustrating you. It's going to make you upset watching the game, and it's going to ruin the experience of sitting down watching these games on Sunday. So the sooner you realize what the Saints are in 2025, the better. Hey, what's good, TJ? This is Algiers. I've been watching your channel for a long time now. Keep doing your thing. I feel good about our team this week. Open opportunity, who they? Yeah, I feel good too, Algiers. I think that the Saints had a chance to win, even if Brock Purdy was in the lineup, even if George Kittle was in the lineup. I think that they made things a little bit more comforting to Saints fans, like to know that they aren't going to just go out there and just get boat raced every single week. But to me, this is going to be a very telling game about Spencer Rattler. If he can play solid against Robert Saleh's defense, then I think that, that's a step in the right direction. Like, you start seeing turnovers and mistake after mistake, I think that is going to make some Saints fans kind of sour on him. But, you got to be able to play some of your best ball against some of the top teams in the league. And even if you don't come away with victories, you got to look serviceable, man. You got to look serviceable. If they go out there and the offense can't move the football and they don't generate any points, I just think that the whispers are going to get a little bit louder. But, I'm also wondering, do the New Orleans Saints finally accept that this is where they are as a team? Like, we know that they have $24 million in cap space, and, they haven't went out here to try to, sign anybody. So maybe this is one of those situations where the Saints are taking 2025 to evaluate what they actually have on the roster, not putting too much emphasis on, the free agent market to bring somebody in, but to have almost like a feast or famine type attitude. Maybe they're content with the fact that they have a nice core of players that can go out there that's going to give you everything that they have, and they might win games, but they might, lose a few games as well. And maybe they okay with that. Maybe they just, want a tough, scrappy team because they feel like that'll probably, make the fan base happy. But right now, I just feel like they just rebuilding. They understand where they are, and, they're trying to make the best of it. Some Saints fans fail to realize that Spencer is a 5th-round pick, not a 1st or a 2nd or a 3rd. It's going to take time. Yeah, I mean, he was a 5th-round pick, even if people feel like, man, maybe that shouldn't have been the case. And, people go back to his high school days when he was the number 1 rated quarterback coming out. But at the same time, like, you're still a 5th-round pick, and you still was, drafting around where some people would consider you as a project. So I just think that if he goes out and he plays well against the 49ers, I think that he would have won some more fans over in week 2. I agree. Rattler got to show out. He has potential, just got to put it together. He got to put it together, and also Kellen Moore has to trust him. He has to trust him. I think that there's a lack of trust there. And, I understand Kellen Moore. He's probably just taking mental notes at what he's actually seeing. There are some things that he probably is seeing that we don't, right? He knows what it looks like, and maybe he's taking mental notes. Maybe he looked at that interception of Will Johnson, even though it was taken off the board, he's looking at it like, man, that could be a possibility. He put the ball in the harm's way in certain situations. So maybe I will hold my timeouts. Maybe I would just go into the half being down by a touchdown. But you got to be able to trust Spencer Rattler. Like, you got to allow him to go out there to make a name for himself or to, break. It's plain and simple. You want to see what you actually have in this guy. So when you do your evaluation, you can say, man, we did everything we possibly can to put you in a position to succeed. But if you're putting training wheels on a guy, I don't think you're going to understand fully what you actually have. Now, credit to Spencer Rattler. He wasn't turning the ball over. He was putting the ball where it needed to be. It was on time. The tempo when the Saints were moving the football, he was finding success. Now you got to punch it in and get 6 points instead of 3, but he's able to move the football. So if he can actually not only move the football, but get the ball into the end zone, I think that, it'll be, a positive season for Spencer Rattler. But, it also has to come down to Kellen Moore trusting him and, being a little bit risque at times. I'm going to take a few more and then I'm going to have to go ahead and get up out of here, folks. Says, I feel like Shuck being 26, which is my age. I make 27 Saturday. Do dude even have to really play, though? His rookie contract, he'll be 30, which is crazy work. Well, look, I think he'll play sooner rather than later. But, if he develops and, let's just say he sits on the bench this year, Spencer Rattler plays, the Saints don't make it, to the postseason, another season is over, and Spencer Rattler comes back next year along with Tyler Shuck, and Tyler Shuck has been on the bench and he's developed into the player that you want him to be. Well, he'll be the starter. And in 2026, if Spencer Rattler goes out there and he's played good enough in order for the Saints to win some football games, for you not to even be looking at Shuck. I think that's the best case scenario for Tyler Shuck. Having Spencer Rattler go out there, put forth solid performances, but not to a point where you're like, well, 2026, Spencer Rattler is our guy. Like all the while, I feel like Tyler Shuck needs to be developing into the quarterback that he needs to be in order for him to be a starter. So maybe next training camp, when you're actually competing, you actually beat out the competition. So, I don't want to hear about Tyler Shuck. I think if you're hearing about Tyler Shuck, that means that the Saints aren't doing good enough as a team, and for the Saints have to go and make that switch. And I don't want the Saints to make a switch because I want them to win some football games. And then the penalties will forever kill drives. Got to be more disciplined. Yeah, there are things that you can't control. You can't control, not having as much experience. You can't control not, having the talent at times, right? You just got to go with what you're going with and seeing what you have. But you can control penalties, mistakes, right? Staying ahead of the chains, not turning the ball over, making sure that you're lined up correctly. Like, those are the things that you can focus on that can minimize your chances of getting beat. And, the Saints are one of those teams where they just have to play pretty much perfect in order for them to win. They got to have a balanced attack. They can't turn the ball over. And also the defense has to generate some turnovers and create short fields for the offense. That is how you're going to win football games more so than not in 2025. And lastly, it says, I think Spencer Rattler throws for at least 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. I don't know if I see that against a Robert Sala's, defense. But if he can throw a touchdown or even 2 of them in a game, I just think that that's a step in the right direction. This is a really good defense. They have a really good coordinator. And if Spencer Rattler can navigate through that, then I think that, everybody, for the most part, would have to concede that, okay, they made the right decision in selecting him as the starter, because this is a really good defense. And the things that they actually do, they're able to get pressure on the quarterback. They don't have to go out there and blitz. They got some really quality players up front that can get to the quarterback, like Nick Bosa. So if he can navigate through these waters, then I think that this would be very telling for Spencer Rattler. And I think that he would have won over some Saints fans in the process. But I want to say thank you all for checking out the State of the Saints podcast. Really do appreciate it. A little bit later on today, I'll drop the Saints short of the day, kind of talking about the Saints' keys to victory in detail. So I'll be putting that out a little bit later. But I ask that you hit the like button if you enjoy the State of the Saints podcast and all this content. Be sure to follow me on X at TJAYJones8. Really do appreciate you all's time. We'll be back on the State of the NFL tonight. You have a Thursday night game. You got the Washington Commanders taking on the Green Bay Packers. Should be a fun game. 2 young quarterbacks, Jordan Love, Jaden Daniels, going up against one another. Both teams are 1-0, and one of them are going to get to 2-0. And it should be a fun game on both sides. Both teams have a lot of talent. So if you want to be a part of that watch along, make sure you subscribe to the State of the NFL podcast channel. Till next time, all I got to say is, who dat?
Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast. Please subscribe to our channel.
All I got to say is, who dat?